Well, it's hard to define because debates have been long and now. But the thing is, now I'm working in Bolivia, and what I can observe there is that it's really hard to define what is real climate migrant, because talking about migration, there is always different kind of drivers, and climate is one. It's part of one of these drivers, which may be economic, demographic, political, and others. And the environment, caused or not by climate change, is one of these drivers. This is really hard to define if it is completely defined by the economic factors or by climate factors, because all these factors, these drivers, are intertwined. They are always interlinked. So very often climate change may add a pressure on economic factors. For instance, a family living from farming activities may have more constraints because of climate change events, less water, less precipitation, these kind of things, which will have an effect on the economy and their livelihoods of the households or the village or the individuals as well. In Bolivia, this problematic is becoming very important because urban areas are growing very much, and during the last 20 or 30 years, cities are growing and growing. The demographic pressure is high, and it's really important to better understand what are the pushing factors behind this demographic growth, for instance. So I'm really interested in the glacier issue in Bolivia, yes, because in Bolivia and more generally in the Andes, but most in Bolivia, glaciers are retreating at a very, very fast rate. I mean, during the last 30 years, Bolivian glaciers lost 50% of their volume, which is huge. So the problem is that sooner or later there's gonna be a lack of water, a very high problem of water availability for rural areas where I'm studying. I'm studying in some watershed, in communities living close from the mountains, but also for the cities, because talking about migration, people are circulating, people are involved in mobility process between rural areas and urban areas, but both areas are affected by the same problems. In this case, glacier issues are affecting the entire area, so causing very high problems of water availability. This is a very important point because, for instance, in Bolivia, very few have been done so far to mitigate the effect of glacier retreat. So the importance to me as a researcher would be, first of all, to talk about the issue, to raise awareness about the issue, which is not only a rural issue, but as well a urban issue, which is extremely important because most of the population is living in densely inhabited areas, which are the urban areas in Latin America. And first of all, I think this is the most important, is to talk about it and to improve the knowledge we have about these processes of deglaciations and the impact it may have on demographic processes. The indigenous living in the Andean part of Bolivia, they are used to cope with a very hard environmental context, because the altitude is really high. They have always known drought episodes, period with really few water, so they're really good to cope with these adverse effects. The thing is changing now with climate change is that these environmental disruptions are increasing, and there is a higher variability of these kind of processes. as well as a much higher level of uncertainty about the rain, when the rain is coming, when the next hail frost is coming, when the next storm is coming. The level of uncertainty is growing, and this is a very important part which is affecting the livelihood of the communities in Bolivia, for instance. So mobility is part of a response, for instance. Mobility is not new. Mobility has always been part of the way Andean community are coping with environment. So they are always involved in mobile process, working a few days in the cities, then coming back to the community, to the village during the weekend, working abroad, coming back. So mobility is a very, very important aspect of their life and helping. I think it's really helping to cope with these, with the effects of climate change, for instance, in this area. For Bolivia so far, we know with all the research that it has been done on a glacier, for instance, that it is too late to mitigate these effects on glacier retreat. Glaciers are disappearing, and there is really few to do to counterbalance this effect. They are gonna disappear. So this is a fact, actually. Now we have to think about mitigation measures, and in parallel, maybe more important, to adaptation measures to deal with these huge changes. NGOs are really active, and they're doing a very good job, I think, in Bolivia, because many NGOs are working in this area, and they work mainly in water management, for instance. So it helps to better manage the available amount of water that there is. So maybe this is a starting point to better cope with these changes.